He's such a funny kid. How about Ravenna Preschool's letting me set up? I'm gonna set up an office day there for work, and so the families can come in and talk to me.
I believe, Cheryl, you're leading us off this evening?
Yes, at 6 o'clock, I will bring the Community and Economic Development meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is the TIF, tax increment financing. And we have Dennis West here tonight to go over this.
Right into it, Dennis. Yeah, oh, that's right, they moved you up.
So good evening. Tonight, I want to propose a new incentive program that's never been offered through the city of Ravenna. And this complements a lot of the projects in which we attract businesses from outside the area, and it helps the businesses and the projects to move forward because it provides an additional incentive piece that typically isn't there, because the tax increment financing is an abatement that's based around infrastructure. So as a municipality puts infrastructure into a project, water, sewer, roadway, things like that, a local municipality has the ability to place an abatement on a property for that infrastructure. What that tax increment financing does is that it helps pay back the local municipality for the infrastructure in which they put in. So we can do a term, and you can do regulations, state regulations go up to 30 years, but one of the things that we want to do is place a 15-year tax abatement on an existing piece of property for a project that's already underway. We would have done this in the beginning, except the fact of there's already a tax abatement on that property through an enterprise zone incentive program. So you can't run two tax abatements together. It won't make sense. So what we're going to do is we're going to piggyback off of the enterprise zone tax abatement for the one project that we already have going through. The city had to put roadway, water, and sewer into this existing project. And I don't have the ordinance right now. We're kind of tweaking the ordinance through our legal team. That ordinance will come through at a later time, probably next week or the next meeting. Hopefully as soon as possible, though. Because what we want to do is the enterprise zone tax abatement that's currently on this current project runs 15 years. So this, if we agree to a tax increment financing on the back end, this would run year 16 through year 30. And what it would do is it would abate the taxes on that property for 15 more years. However, instead of the money being collected from the county and being dispersed over all the different tax levying agencies, because this is based on an infrastructure, the money would come back to the city, and it would make the schools completely whole. On an enterprise zone abatement, those abatements don't make the schools completely whole. So it's typical that the business has to create an agreement with the school district to pay back a certain amount of taxes. And it's usually about 20 to 25% that the business has to pay back the school district. On top of that, the city has an agreement with the school district to pay an additional 32.5% to the school district to help alleviate those loss of taxes. On a TIF, a tax increment financing, the city does not have to pay back an additional amount. The school is made completely whole. You should have received a spreadsheet, and this spreadsheet was created by our economic development lawyer, Bricker and Graydon, down in Columbus. You'll notice they have the broken out, the millages for the school, millages for the total millage, and the millage broken out between the school district and the joint vocational district. At the end of that, all the net comes back to the city. Anybody have questions so far?
Yeah, I
Yes.
have, oh, go ahead, Paul.
Well, okay, you mentioned this project, but unless I missed something, I didn't recall what the exact project is.
The project right now is LG Chem.
Okay, that's,
And the reason I kind of sent out that email about the confidentiality was if LG Chem's lawyers found out that we were doing this, because they had a part in the enterprise zone, they would also want a part in this as well. But I'm just gonna put it out there, it's LG Chem.
okay,
So we're going to put an abatement, a 15-year abatement on the back end of that project.
So, let's see, I was going to ask one question, and your comment spurred on another one, but, so this spreadsheet I'm looking at, my understanding of TIF, and by the way, you know, as you know, because we've been going back and forth over this since last Thursday or Friday, I've taken a crash course on TIF, so I'm trying to learn, but I'm still learning, so I don't have all the particulars because it is fairly complicated. But my understanding is, for a TIF, it's first of all to pay for public improvement. So if a company is paying for their own improvement on their own land, they're not eligible for this funds, only if they're paying towards those streets or those sewers or whatever. Since the beans have been spilled, has LG contributed to any of the public improvement projects?
No, the city has paid for all the public
Right.
improvement for the roadway, the waterway,
Yeah.
and the sewer lines.
So I don't think they'd be eligible for it anyway, from my understanding.
Yes, they're eligible for the TIF.
No, I mean, the TIF,
Oh, I see.
the
The
TIF,
money is not eligible to go back to LG.
yes, that's my point. Okay. So now that I look at this spreadsheet, the other understanding I have about the TIF is that once we enact it, then it has to be the improvements going forward from that point in time. In other words, whatever the value of the property and parcel is right now and the assessed taxes on that current property, that wouldn't be included in the money that is generated through the TIF. That still goes to the county as it normally would without a TIF, correct?
The property hasn't been assessed yet.
Oh, boy. Okay, well, that puts a little wrinkle.
That's-
That's good for us, by
That's
the way.
why we want to try and push this through as fast as possible.
Okay, I got it.
Because if we can get this passed through as fast as possible, if we can get this passed by beginning of December, get this over to the auditor's office to be recorded, they can get this recorded before that property gets assessed.
Okay, that's good news
That's
for us.
why we want to try and do this.
Yeah,
on-
and by the way, thank you, and Brian, for bringing this, because this is an exciting benefit for the city. And from my understanding, as you've already said, the TIF does not affect the school district because they're collecting what they would have collected anyway.
Correct.
It only benefits the city because we get the part of the property taxes that all those other entities that have levies would have gotten, including our own part. So that's good too. And LG Chem or whoever we apply this to still pays what they would have paid, just where the money goes is different. So they're not disadvantaged.
Right.
But we do have to designate by ordinance the projects or the proposed projects of public improvement or the ones we've already done in the ordinance.
It will be.
Yeah. Okay, so then I think I only have one other question, and that is, by my understanding, we do have to hold a public hearing. And I think it's 30 days before we enact this. So the timetable may not work for December. Well, it might well work for December, but not November. What was, maybe I missed the plan. What was the
Well,
plan?
We have, if we can, once I get the ordinance back, we have to wait 14 days for the schools
Right.
to be able, the school district and Maplewood will each receive a letter stating that we're going to do this. And that they will be made whole out of this incentive program. Once, after that 14 days, then council has the ability to move forward to review and approve that. So,
But I do believe that the ordinance does require a public hearing. That might be something we have to look into in terms of timing.
Yeah, I believe you're right about the time, 30 days.
So that's something you might want to talk to the law firm about, just to make sure we have our timing correct. Because you're right, we want to do this before the tax assessments are in place.
and that's why we want to try and move this forward as quickly as possible. I don't know if that, an emergency session can be taking place to make this happen within a timely period. If it can, then that's something that we may want to take a look at.
I think there's a lot on the agenda tonight, and we can, if there's other things for a special meeting, we can take that into consideration. I think right now, if council's okay moving this forward, then we can figure out the logistics of approving it. You get the communication out in 14 days, and I think there's still time to have a public hearing for December, if that's the goal.
And look into whether those 14 days count towards the 30 days, too, because I don't know if that's the case.
No.
So I think it's just a
Well, I don't-
30-day, not like a 44-day time period. And just one other thing, which is, if you want to follow up, I did send you information about the income tax implication, because there is something in there, in the code that the Department of Development refers to, that if the city collects income tax and the property owner will have a payroll above $1 million, that there has to be something worked out. And I reviewed it today, and I think it's not an implication as long as the schools are held, whole. But it's in there, so I have questions about what that means.
Yeah, the school will be held whole completely, and actually, they'll make out better than they will under the enterprise zone
Right,
abatement.
right.
As for your $1 million, typically, those are requirements that are set forth in which we're able to offer incentives for,
Okay.
just like the enterprise zone. We have to be held to a certain amount of employees and a
Right.
certain amount of payroll, and the project has to meet a certain guideline in order for us to be able to offer certain types of incentives. So they meet all this, and we ran everything through our legal team down at Graydon,
Okay.
Bricker. I respect our economic development lawyer. He started with Ohio Department of Development when Ohio Department of Development started.
Okay.
And he was the one who helped them write their enterprise zones and their CRAs. So he wrote all the legal information requirements for ODOD. And now he's supplying assistance to local municipalities through Bricker. That's why we utilize Bricker and Graydon, is because of his background. So I respect all the information that he's kind of guided us through, and his, his guidance is telling us if we can do this in a very short time frame, it would benefit the city quite a bit.
Dennis, I have a question also. The payment in lieu of taxes that they're going to pay, can be used on infrastructure for specific developments. Is it only prospective out in the future, or can it go back and pay for those improvements that we put in the project at the front end? Are we able to use that money coming in year 16 to go back and pay all those infrastructure costs at that time?
So your tax increment financing incentive is to that piece of property, to that land, to that project. At the 16-year mark, as the money comes in, that money comes into a pilot fund. At the 30-year mark, whatever money that the city had placed in for that infrastructure, that money, cost of that infrastructure goes back to the city to help pay for that infrastructure. All the rest of the money, in accordance with state ordinance, any money left over after that can go into a city general fund. So that money stays with that property to help pay for the funding of that infrastructure.
So in effect, you're saying that it can go back and pay for those
Yes.
from the beginning of the project?
Yes.
Okay. Do we anticipate additional infrastructure projects as part of LG's development out there that the monies could also go to?
Specifically for LG, no.
Okay.
There should be no other utility work.
Okay. Okay.
Well, I have a question then to follow up. Is LG still in the process of planning and building their facility? So there could be. I mean, we could have road changes and other things that could develop as a result of however they build. So this would be a fund to use at that point in time. And I think the answer to your question is I think you can, as long as, it's a public improvement and it surrounds the entity that's TIFed. Can we say that, TIFed?
Tiff.
Any other questions?
I do have one other question. Are you saying this is the first time that Ravenna has done this? I thought we had done it before with Paris Industries when we were putting in the entrance off of 14 back into Paris Industries, that we did tax increment financing there.
There was an assessment on that, but to my understanding, it wasn't a TIF because the property wasn't abated, as far as I know. I'm trying to find the information on this because the owner of, not Paris, the owner of
Novo?
Spring Seal.
Spring Seal
Oh, yeah.
wants to know the assessment that's going on with that roadway and how much longer that they have to pay on that. So I'm trying to find all the information on all this, but I don't think
Okay.
Paris had a TIF
Okay.
itself. I think Paris had an enterprise zone, a tax abatement, because they're still paying on
Cernus
that.
had one. Yeah,
Cerna had
Novo,
one.
Paris,
They've done two.
Nova, Paris Novo has one tax abatement. Spring Seal has two.
Seeking a third.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to that point yet, but, yeah, that will be coming shortly.
And then we have a potential one for Menards too.
Menards has a tax abatement
Right.
that will have to be amended
Right.
because now they're not talking about building until 2025. Anything else?
Thank you, Dennis.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
And it is the evening for LG. So this is moving forward with the electrical easement.
Just to make sure you're moving that one
I
forward.
was just gonna
the
ask,
TIF.
are we okay to move this
Oh,
forward?
are you guys okay to move it forward?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
All All right, LG Chem electrical easement. Updates?
Yeah, so we met with First Energy on site this afternoon, and we've requested First Energy to move their power line further away from our water tank for construction of the water tank specifically. So they're going back to the drawing board and seeing if they can do it. We've also spoke to the neighbor, the real estate agent for the neighbor, and he believes that it can be done. So in essence, we would be potentially giving First Energy a 25-foot easement on our property, and then the neighbor would provide a 25-foot easement on their property. Run the power lines down, kind of down our driveway that goes to the water tank. The property line, which is approximately 10 feet away from the edge of our driveway. That gives us probably 30 more feet to the water tank, which is my concern. They wanted to be close to the water tank because it fit them. And that's ultimately what it benefited them, not us. So we're putting this on hold or tabling it for now. I do not anticipate having information from them next week. So we'll move it to next month.
Did we get any movement on why they couldn't put it underground? Did we go back and ask them that question again?
It's all about money. They don't want to spend the money.
Didn't originally they talk like they were going to, though?
No, I told them I wanted them to, and they got shut down immediately.
So, Bob, the package says 30,000 is the easement cost?
That was a number that I told them, and they agreed immediately, which was disappointing. Should have asked for more. But at this point, I've even mentioned to the neighbor that I would forfeit our 30,000 if he would give them an easement just to move that off of away from our water tank. It was less about the money, it was more about the location and negotiating.
Okay.
I'm not a fan of their tactics. I've been burnt before by First Energy on several projects. West Main Street, you guys see what happened there. They were not, they came to the public and told the public, this is where we're gonna be. Show up and they put the poles in the middle of the sidewalk. That wasn't where they said they were gonna be. And then they shrugged their shoulders. And unfortunately, the group that I worked with then aren't around. It's a whole new group. Or at least they're not admitting that it's the same group. But
They've been transferred.
we generally get resistance from Dominion also. It's not uncommon.
Okay.
So in a conversation that we had, there was a concern it's going to take a couple more months for First Energy to go back to the drawing board. We pointed out a couple flaws in their design. They showed a pole that was not on our property that they needed to connect to, so they have to fix that anyway. And in the conversation, the group from LG was there and said their project is delayed until February anyway, so this could still work well for them.
Thank you.
And keep in mind, First Energy took 2 years to get to this point. You know, so you know, we shouldn't be held accountable for their delay. They blame Dennis for calling the governor's office and whatever other political stuff. So, and we told them when we negotiated with them 2 weeks ago that everything has to go through city council anyway. And there is a chance city council would have turned it down. There's a chance you would have approved it too, but just a point that we can only go so far without council's approval.
Absolutely. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any management updates?
We will get this done. No doubt about it. And I
There's-
guess I should mention too, we're working with a problem also with the water line out there that they need to hook up for the fire suppressant for the LG complex. And for some reason, there's a lot of debris in that water line. And we've been flushing it for what, a month now?
14 times, I think the last number was.
Yeah, and we're still getting debris out of it. The next step could be possibly looking at a separator, something.
Yeah, I'm not even sure what that is.
Well,
Another would be to drag a
Well,
gigantic
I know
Q-tip through
that
the
when I
line.
talked to the fire chief this morning, they mentioned it to him. And the thought was that we should check with the hospital to see if they have a separator. I don't know whether they've had any problems with this.
Jason flushed at Chestnut Street, and they did not get any debris coming out of the line at Chestnut Street.
Yeah. So we're not sure where this came from, but it's been bits and pieces of pipe, it's been stones, they're getting smaller. But I've talked to, I called Ray Harner. He said he'd come up and help if we wanted him to, and I may ask him. He just thinks we really need to turn around and let it flush, but the problem is we can't do that because water levels drop too much for the hospital and the school, the alarms go off, and they can only do it for so long, and then they have to let it replenish the tower. So, but this too shall be fixed.
Yes. If nobody has anything else, we will adjourn CED at 6:25.
Right, 6:25, call Streets and Sidewalks Committee meeting to order. 4 items on the agenda for consideration this evening. First item, the purchase of solar-powered speed limit signs. I'm not sure who sponsored this.
I have the next, most of these items, all of these items, actually. I was approached by a resident regarding some type of warning signs on North Chestnut Street. And then I looked into them and I thought, well, you know, this would help out. The police department has the trailer that flashes speed limit. As I looked into these, I thought this would serve multiple purposes. I sent a few of you a video link. I can send the rest of council a link tonight or tomorrow. It's like a 6-minute video. It kind of shows how these things can be utilized. The sign, speed limit sign could say 25, 35, whatever, and then below it, it flashes a speed. But it also collects data. It can actually spin a red and a blue strobe to kind of warn people, scare people, motorists, whatever it is. It's my intent to purchase 4, and I would work with the street department. The intent is to work with the street department so we can actually move these. I'm sure we can devise a foundation, a lockable foundation that they could be slid down in and locked and relocate wherever we want. The only thing is if we had a sign that's at 25, it has to fit there or whatever.
Who receives the data that comes back? Does that get reported? I mean, is there like a monthly data that comes in from the reports from these? And would that be shared with the police department then? Or?
I'm actually hoping the police department would run with that data and do it themselves. It's downloaded to a laptop, tablet, through Bluetooth, I think, is how it's done. Yeah, and so you get to speed data. You were copied on it, on the email or not?
I don't think I was. I don't remember seeing it.
All right, let's see here.
I'm not on this committee, so.
Generates charts and graphs with Excel macro, provides half-hour, hour, daily, weekly data on number of vehicles, number of speeders, average speeds, peak speeds, 50th and 85th percentile of the speed.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we would just have to be disciplined enough to do it, to download it. And it would, 4 signs would capture one direction. Each 4 would so if we wanted to flip it over to the other side of the street, that maybe it could just be turned. I don't know how super accurate it is, but.
Have we been receiving complaints on North Chestnut Street? Do you know?
Well,
I mean, is that the premise of?
Yeah, from the school heading south, down the hill, around the bend,
Oh, yeah.
to the bike trail. And same thing with South Diamond Street heading north. You have to hold your foot on the brake the whole time.
So these are movable signs, and that's the plan to
It would be,
move 'em?
I would devise a plan to have them have the ability to relocate them, right?
I don't,
I've seen them in other communities, they do, we all pass stop signs and see them, but we don't see them. These that have the flashing lights, they do catch your attention, so.
The one in Streetsboro, I think, says thank you if you try to see them.
Yeah, it does.
Yes, I saw those. That's
No,
one
I think
part
it's a,
saw
I
that,
think it's a
yeah.
great, I mean, I know we've, in the past, people have called about Highland. I mean, there's a lot of streets
Highland,
Exactly,
that
Bryn Mawr.
really could benefit for safety purposes.
sure.
yeah, you had actually sent this out a while back.
Yes.
I don't
Yeah, in
remember what.
April.
But this is a different company? Or is this
It
the
is a
same
different
company?
company. Yeah, that's a
okay,
different
I
company.
thought so. Yeah, no, I don't think these were meant to be portable, but it's kind of inventive for you to think of a way to do that.
Hollow pipe in the ground, cement it
Yeah.
in, enough so somebody could mow grass across it without tearing their mower up. We'll
Right.
figure it out.
Cool.
Can't be
I
that.
like it. Glad you put time and effort into this.
So the, part of the tracking sheet is that this money would come out of the general fund, since this is for, in essence, the police department. If it came out of the safety levy, well, I can't spend the safety levy money, but I don't think it should come out of the paving levy funding.
Probably not, yeah.
So that'd be the next question is, you know, there to, as, again, that was the tracking sheet out of the general fund.
Can they extend the quote too?
In
If,
regard to-
what's the first, looks like it's good till the beginning of
November 2nd.
November.
Oh, I imagine they will, yeah. I haven't called, the man was on vacation, the salesman was on vacation. And he's in big, and I was on vacation, so. we'll pick-
1 month?
I imagine as long as we can, as long as we have a commitment by December, it'll be fine.
See, there's a 2-year warranty along with this. I didn't, when I was trying to find more information on these, I couldn't really find much on the life expectancy of these. Do you have any idea on?
No, you know, the advantage that they're solar powered, so we don't have to worry about electrical connections and stuff. So we have a solar powered flashing stop sign at Scranton and Maine. Trying to remember when we put that up there. It has to have been 5 years ago. We've never changed the battery on it. So I'll ask that question, you know, if there's what the warranty is.
I'm okay with it. I like the idea. It's a high traffic area, a lot of kids in that area most of the year. Yeah, I'm okay with it. I don't know about the rest of the committee. Anybody else's thoughts or input before we?
I'm not on the committee, but I think it's great that it collects the data as well. It's not just the signs. So, you know, the police department can use it when we're getting complaints, they can check that data. You know, sometimes we get complaints and we realize people aren't speeding on that street. So certainly it does give us the ability to do that as well. I'm for it.
Great.
So-
And I have reached out to the police chief, and he had minimal comments, but he's aware of this. Whether his group's moved, relocating them, or ultimately, I'd like them to move them around. I did ask him what locations he felt would be significant, and
There's a few areas in the city we all know that are
Oh, sure.
constant problems, so, yeah,
It just depends if people adhere to it.
yeah. Well, at this point, we'll go ahead and move that forward. And next item is an analysis of the traffic light at King and Main Street.
so as you know, we widened part of West Main Street, and the intent in 2025 is to widen the rest of it. First Energy is allegedly set to relocate the poles starting in January of '24. So once ODOT paves Main Street, First Energy relocates the poles, then in '25, we can finish widening West Main Street. The traffic signal at King and Main is way outdated. The controller barely works. We will have to either remove that traffic signal or replace it. And the traffic signal at Scranton and Sycamore, Highland, and Cleveland, as you know, had a price tag of $150,000. So the way I have King Street currently operating, it operates a half hour in the morning, half hour in the afternoon. When I say operate, it's going through full cycles. King and Main gets a full cycle. The 23 hours a day, Main Street has green unless there's a call on King to turn left or westbound. So I solicited a couple engineering firms. I got 2 prices to create a traffic signal warrant analysis. We're not supposed to remove or add or alter traffic without a signal warrant analysis. In 2012 or 13, we had all of the west side signals analyzed. This one came back that it was not warranted. However, it's been long enough ago that we should have it redone with the school changing. You know, the junior high gets out of school now before the high school gets out. I don't know why they did it, but so there's kids are walking in different times than they used to, so.
Didn't we have, I remember vaguely when that came before council in 2012, and did we not have people unhappy because when we thought about taking that out, because of the elementary school being there, and kids do use that to cross the street in that location, they use that area and Diamond Street. I think the neighbors on King Street were not for us removing that because of them trying to get out and turn left. So I do remember when that came before council, it wasn't very favorable amongst the, the teachers and people that live in that area. So I don't know.
And I don't remember, I don't remember that was one. So I was going to apply for a grant to do the 8 signals on the west side of town. I was only able to apply for 3 intersections because those were the only 3 that were warranted. We did get funding to do Diamond, Oakwood, and Scranton, and we did those, but the other ones weren't warranted. So I don't, maybe I did come to council and ask
I
to
think you
eliminate
did.
it.
I
but-
can remember
but
that
what
because of
I-
the school and the kids, and that was like, people were concerned the amount of speed that would, if we didn't have, that working during the times that school was in session, that people might tend to go quicker, kids could possibly get hit.
Well,
They
so-
didn't feel that the study was, showing that side of things.
No matter what, they're still in a school zone at that location.
Right.
The school zone doesn't end until the east side of King Street. I would absolutely put a pedestrian crossing Main Street. We call it an ad hoc crosswalk. So there would still be signals. If a person pushes a pedestrian button, it will turn red. But there's very few people that cross the crosswalk at that location. It's still certainly not $150,000 for an ad hoc crosswalk, but it does
Still.
provide protection to the pedestrian.
Is the end goal then, if it comes back as not warranted, you would keep the light, but it would just be flashing then unless?
Get rid of it?
No, we have to.
You would wanna get rid of
We'll
it.
have to remove all the poles, the signals, at least on the south side of Main Street. We'll have to remove those poles because they're in the way.
So in that scenario then that you're talking about, that's only existing. If it comes back as not warranted, that pedestrian crossing then,
We would have to build a new pedestrian crossing no
Okay.
matter what.
Okay.
Correct.
I just know there's a lot of kids that do walk in that area by themselves too, so.
Yeah, I remember that conversation as well, concern from parents and people that lived in the area with smaller kids. But it doesn't look like this survey does any of that, it's just basically traffic.
It's based on the ODOT manual, and it's a legal procedure to protect the engineering firm and protect us also, as long as it's done per the ODOT code, the ODOT method. And then, I do believe that it's not warranted, but then, again, I want a new study proving that it's not warranted, and then city council has the authority to say yay or nay, and if you want the signal, just know that it's gonna cost money.
do you know the timeline of these? If we were to get approval in November, what that timeline would
They'll
look
be
like?
done probably in a month,
Okay.
I presume.
okay with the study.
Yes.
Yeah, I think this study itself would be important.
We'll go ahead and move that one forward as well. Next item, purchase of 8 bike racks.
This is something that's came up over the years. Chelsea and I have discussed it, Andrew and I have discussed it. I was in buying popcorn a week or two ago, and Gwen and I had this discussion. So I found some, what I believe are less expensive bike racks. If that's something that you guys want to install. These are similar to what Garrettsville is using currently.
What's a bollard or bollard bike rack? What is that? Just that green drawing on the next page?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Now, I think your drawing, you're going to see it sideways.
Oh, I flipped it.
So what are the,
Oh, this,
Yeah, there you go.
what are the locations that these would be?
I don't know exactly. One for each block is what I was thinking. Maybe
Okay.
somewhere mid-block. If there's a specific location that might benefit a group of businesses near that location. You know, there's a couple blocks that are very busy with the trees, hydrants, streetscape that may not work as well, or maybe we want to attach them to the curb of the flower bed or something like that.
Well, and we've had lots of conversation about, bringing the hike and bike traffic up towards downtown. It would be great to have bike racks to put the bikes on.
The reason I asked that is, had the designated number of 8, so I wondered if you had
Yeah, so it would
8
be-
specified locations.
So they would be between Sycamore, Meridian, Chestnut, Parkway, Chestnut, Prospect, something like that. If you want to do 12, we can do 12, but, this is the price for, it's a little less than 2,500, but Jason's crew's gonna have to buy the hardware to install it in the concrete. So this little extra would help cover for,
Susie's Tea Shop has requested it a couple times to have bike racks in front of her place.
okay. The only other question would be, what color are you interested in?
I think what I mentioned was whatever was across from, I think Tavern 1888 has a couple bike racks over there, I thought. Could be wrong, but whatever matches, I guess, is what I would lean towards.
Bike racks?
Unless it's just fencing that's over
I
there,
think it's
but
just
there's,
fencing.
is it just fencing?
They look like bike racks.
Blue or green?
Right.
Blue
Yes.
for Ravenna and green for nature. That's just my opinion.
Well, next week, let me know, whatever color.
Something that they can see. I don't need anybody walking into it.
Yeah.
So navy blue, or that blue's probably not a great option.
So the next item is the most easiest, because it's free. This is simply consent legislature for ODOT to crack seal.
Take the mile out.
And I didn't even get into the mile markers, because that's how they use. I know the little tiny piece on State Route 5 is just this little tiny wedge that jettisons out for some reason. So they must be doing that section. It's the only part of Route 5 that the city owns, and the rest of State Route 80, I have no idea. But we're not paying for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Move
Go ahead
it
and
forward.
Move that forward as well. 6:43, management update, sorry.
We're good.
Got ahead of myself.
We're good. Go ahead.
6:43, I will adjourn the Streets and Sidewalks Committee meeting.
Yeah, at 6:43, I'll start the utility. First one on the agenda, there are 2 contracts for the proposed new tank consultants. Mr. Finney, would you want to elaborate
Yeah.
more on that?
Yep. So the tracking sheet reads, authorize the mayor to enter into 2 contracts with Tank Industry Consultants headquartered, blah, 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 Indianapolis, to develop the plans and specs for the demolition, which was one contract, and the second is the design of the new elevated tank, and appropriate $40,000 for those 2 contracts.
So there's no saving the tank, huh?
there's no saving the tank. We're hoping there's resale value, and, I mean, there's gonna be scrap value no matter what.
Yeah,
But it's, according to the consultant, they don't see a way that we can guarantee that we'll be successful trying to
Sure.
save it.
no, that makes sense.
And obviously, spending government money, we need to be successful.
So the packet has estimates, water tank funding to date. Those are what you and your office threw together? Not these consultants?
The consultant put these numbers
Oh,
together.
the consultant did.
Yes.
So we are committing just $500,000 from the ARPA fund? That's what this says.
I think that's,
As of right now.
that was the third agenda update, or third thing on the agenda, the water tower update. Is that what you're,
Yes,
we're
that's-
jumping the gun?
Yeah.
Can I ask a question real quick
sorry.
before we go to that? The composite that you're choosing, is that, do you know the life, is there a better lifespan on composite that might be used?
We're using 75 years, but there really should be no reason it wouldn't live 100 as long as it's maintained. So the intent is, it'll have a concrete base, which doesn't need maintained, have a steel bowl, and then an aluminum roof.
Okay,
So the steel should be the only real coatings, on a 20, 25-year basis.
okay.
You know, the city park tank, I think, was built in the 50s, and there's nothing wrong with the city park tank.
I'll say that's been well maintained over the years. Okay, if there are no other comments, this is something that's, needs to be done. That's a very important project. Okay, the second thing on the agenda is the backup power and electrical for the lift station for the wastewater. This lift station says at Freedom. It is just north of the hike and bike trail. And the reason why this is requested, this is, as far as I know, no one really knows how old this is. Could be 50, could be 60-some years old, it's hard to really say. And the last big storm that came through here a while back, this was down for 3-4 days. And a big part of this is having a generator installed, run by natural gas. This generator is purchased and installed, then that would alleviate any problems that I've had, and then this would last for who knows how many decades. This is critical, and the thing about it is, this company can't start on it real quick. They're backed up like a lot of other companies are. But hopefully they can start it in ample time. That way, if there are any big storms that come through again, the same type of problem will not happen again. The equipment at this lift station, to my knowledge, is probably the oldest and the most worn out in this system.
I was just gonna ask out of curiosity, was this the one near the hike and bike? Is that what, that one?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
How many lift stations? I know that's a weird question.
How many lift stations
Yeah,
do we
lift
have?
stations do we have?
Diamond, Freedom, Lovers Lane, Maplewood, Chestnut.
Okay.
Yeah, you guys had 2 pumps running out of that, I think, for a while. I don't know if you
Yeah,
saw it.
I did see it.
But, yeah.
Okay, if there are no comments about this could be moved forward.
Move it
Move
forward.
it forward.
Great. And Mr. Finney just made comments pertaining to the water tower.
Yeah, a week or two ago, maybe last month, I guess, you guys asked where the funding stood. And it seems like every time we talk about this tank, it becomes more expensive. So put together the funding So we have 3.238 million set aside, and, you know, they're estimating the new tank, now that we have decided on the design, as I just said, concrete, steel, and aluminum, to be somewhere between 3.8 and 4 million. Engineering services includes construction management, administration, and, you know, all, basically the time my office is gonna spend during the inspection, which could be a full year. That's where the $200,000 is estimated. Dismantle the old tank. Worst case, the design firm is expecting $450,000. We won't know until we bid the project out exactly where. Maybe the contractor that bids it will want to resell it. We know that it's going to get scrapped. I mean, it's pretty thick steel. It's almost inch and a half thick at the bottom, and then it gets thinner as it gets to the top. So there's a lot of weight in scrap steel. If somebody wants to build it or remove it, keep it, resell it, reconfigure it, and that's up to them. So we might see a discount there. We just don't know.
Do we know the value of that?
The only way we could calculate a value of scrap steel, what it currently is today. But we
I
don't
mean, I'm
know.
just curious, like,
Yeah, no.
what type of money would that be if, you know, we chose, I mean, why wouldn't we keep it to, why wouldn't we receive any of the money? Would that be a part of, you know, the actual bid process, the money, you know, if they're taking it and they're making money off of it? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. In the past, I've bid projects similar to this with a deduct,
We
like an
did-
alternate as a deduct type
Yeah,
of a
because
thing.
that happened on Prospect Street. There was a lot of, remember, expensive, was it the stone? or
The
and-
sidewalk, the flagstone.
Yeah, that was worth a lot of money that they made out with, so, I'm just curious.
We did that with the old cemetery retaining wall also when we rebuilt that. We will bid it in some fashion like that, just so it is transparent to what the tank, what the value of it is to that specific contractor.
Yeah, I'm just curious, I think that's important.
Yeah. So, obviously, we're gonna be short from what we have. I know the ARPA funds, the second half of the ARPA funds is being discussed in a meeting, but, you know, there's definitely a project that it could go to and would definitely can be earmarked and spent within the next year, I presume. That's my campaign for the other half of the ARPA funds.
Yeah. Because otherwise, you gotta use some of the water fund, which is in pretty good shape, but it will take a nice chunk out, or borrow some money, which, you know, is interesting.
So once this tank is completed and installed in service, City Park tank will be taken out of service for repainting. We did the outside in 2011, I think, to the tune of $280,000, $300,000, something like that. So the inside needs done now. We're gonna probably be in a similar cost. And so that water fund will get hit quickly through these other projects.
Okay. Casement?
This was just a discussion. There's no tracking sheet for it.
Rob, I cut you off, but did you have a question?
No, I ask about the ARPA funds later, planning committee meeting.
Okay, if no other comments, is there a management update on these topics?
No.
Okay. Utilities Committee will adjourn at 6:53.
Okay, well, at 6:53, I will call to order the planning committee meeting. We do have 3 items on the agenda, but I'm going to add one more. We have an update, I believe, from the Design Review Commission. Mr. Sotel's here to give that with regards to the prospectus contract. So we'll add that at the end of the agenda. First item is revision of Chapter 214 of our codified ordinances. In your packet is an update to that section. It basically erases what's there. And based upon what Brian sent me via email, it kind of captures what we discussed last month. So 214 is called our policy. Of course, I forgot to change the title. Should be policy for purchases now over 25,000, if that's the number we want to pick. So basically, this allows city departments, city department heads, the mayor, to expend $25,000, up to $25,000, without coming to council for approval. And that's kind of what we were talking about. Now, we don't, I mean, this isn't, I'm not presenting this as an end product. This is certainly a draft. And so the first question is, is 25,000 the right number? That's kind of the number Brian threw out.
Did a few surveys around, looked.
Yeah.
A lot of this comes from the city of Aurora. They kind of use some of their language, but kind of a combination of other places I looked at too.
So, questions, is that too high? Does that seem like the right amount of money?
I mean, if that's comparison to other areas and the amount that, what is the amount that seems to be asked quite
Yeah.
here? What is the dollar amount that you tend to see a lot?
Well, we really don't, I mean, that's the thing, we really don't have a good amount now. We kind of just try to bring stuff to you that seems pretty significant, but we got to fix that. $75,000 is the new competitive bidding threshold through the state. It was $50,000. It changed here in the last month. And that's only certain types of projects, construction type projects and all that. So this would be stuff that is below, I mean, if it's that amount, we have to do X, Y, Z. We have to,
Right.
there's certain requirements the state requires us to do. We have no choice. We have to bid it, and council has to approve those, all that kind of stuff. So this is for amounts that are not quite that amount. That are in the budget. I mean, these are things in the budget
They're
that we
already
keep in mind.
budgeted, so.
Well, and it didn't really say that
Right.
in our prior, or current
Yes.
version of this code. We did put that in there, that it would, if it's under the threshold, whatever we decide it to be, it would have to be budgeted already in the budget. So
Correct,
that's
yeah.
one thing we're tightening up. But before we kind of move on to different components, let's kind of get consensus about the amount. I'm okay with 25.
Yeah.
Mr. Kelly?
What's the downside of $25,000?
It seems a lot higher than 2,000. But I don't know if there is one.
Yeah.
But now is the time to set the amount, I guess.
I do think that we have too many contracts coming to council for action. We've got just many, many routine things that are, as we say, budgeted for and set aside. Seems like we've got, so, yeah, I think we should put a dollar amount. I'm not sure what's best, 10,000, 25,000, 50, I don't know.
Right.
Do we do it incrementally since we're jumping into our first effort at
Set it lower.
doing it? Should we set it lower as we start here to see how it works before we put it up? I don't have strong feelings either way on it.
So this contract that you're not referring to contracts, you're just referring to purchasing, correct?
Well, kind of both, I would suggest.
So if it's a contract, then you need to write it as such, the mayor can sign a contract if it's below a certain amount. Because I have three items on the agenda earlier. One was 15,000, one was 5,000, one's 2,500.
Right.
But that's because they're not budgeted, they're not in the permanent budget.
Right.
Well, that would be a stipulation according to the wording we're talking about. So if they weren't budgeted for, you have to come to council to have the appropriation. So it would not matter what the amount is.
Right, okay.
Okay, because we don't want people just arbitrarily taking money out of some, budget that's not there, right? And by the way, some contracts, regardless of the amount, require council or legislative approval. So those would still come to us, no matter what the cost was. I mean, I thought 25 was a little bit high, just out of the blue, it seems a little bit high. We could make it 20, we could make it 10, and if we find we're still getting inundated with contracts and purchases, we could raise it then. That's kind of your point, Dr. Calfee.
Yeah, I also go back to what is the problem that we're trying to solve? Is it just the procedural problem of too many purchase contracts coming through council and questions on the clerk and the finance office part about should this go or should it not go? Is that the main reason why we're wanting to move toward it?
Yeah, I think that there's questions about what needs to come before council, and this would clarify it, and also the fact that we're sort of like a bureaucratic, stumbling block, that we have to deal with contracts that we know we're going to sign anyway, and that have been budgeted for.
And some of the stuff gets purchased anyway, and then after the fact, I mean, so, and a lot of the stuff, it can hold up, some, especially if it's something with, the street department, the water department. I mean, stuff comes up, and if it's already in their budget, why are we the last stop that's gonna hold something up if they need a piece of equipment?
Well,
I just think that's.
Piggyback on that, because I think if it's in the budget and we've looked at the budget, then we know or should have asked the questions of what is coming. Usually that's what we ask during that commission. So I think I'm fine with the 25,000.
Me too.
And I think it's kind of both, you're not approving as many contracts, but then also we should just be asking those questions during the budget process of what is coming, and we usually do, so.
And, and like we could raise it incrementally, we could lower it if we find it's a problem.
It's a start.
So, now, there is wording in here that suggests that the director of finance is going to, it says certify. So, I mean, there is a vetting process. It's not like, department heads are just signing purchase orders or whatever willy-nilly. So, I think that captures everything. The only other question I had, and it's not in the new revision here, but it's parenthetically added to the end, do we want a reporting mechanism? In other words, every month we get all these reports before our regular meeting. Maybe we could get a report from the finance department listing the contracts, purchases that were done without approval of council, and, how difficult would that be?
I mean, would you just want like a check listing? Was that kind of something you'd want, that lists all the checks that we cut? I mean, we could do a
Something like that.
report for that.
That way, we're actually informed of what's
Yeah.
being done.
Yeah, I mean, it's very common at a lot of your smaller governments, like your cemetery and stuff. You're gonna have those kind of things, townships. City governments, a little bit less, but sometimes there are some reports that come out. So, I mean, we could do that, and those are pretty easy to produce.
Okay.
So we just run something off the system.
I believe it's a good way of communicating, a good way of positive communication to us.
Right.
What's the format of those reports? Do they come out like in an Excel form that we can see the data and?
Yeah, anything off Civica, which is our accounting system, you can run in PDF or Excel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it matters, when it adds, it's added to the pack, it's either in paper or PDF. All right, so if we're okay, then we can move this forward, and by next week, I'll add some wording about reporting at the end of this, too. Is that okay? You good, Dr. Calfee? All right, good. Then we will move that forward. The next item on the agenda is spending of ARPA funds. So what is unaccounted for in ARPA at this? What's the number we have
So,
left?
when you take out the 500,000 for the water tower, that leaves us $576,161.
Okay.
So that's what we have to work with left.
So, and based upon the previous discussion, I mean, is there some concern about leaving some more behind for the water tower? Or are we comfortable leaving it up to the water fund?
Well, we have other people that
Yeah.
also have an interest in it.
Well, that's why I'm at, you mean the ARPA funds?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's why I asked. I want to know what the number is that we have, that we haven't allocated yet, or haven't, decided how we're going to spend it.
Judy has like a pretty large project at Chestnut Hills. I think would like to see some or all of that paid for with that. That was redoing the grass.
Yeah, whatever
or
that
the
carpet
Kids
is.
play.
whatever.
Turf,
Turf, yeah.
yeah, for Chestnut Hills. I'm sure she can find other uses for it too.
Do you have projects lined up that you might want to use for that, that amount? And is that something you might, itemize and bring to council, even during committee of the whole, that we might be able to move forward and allocate the funds? Or is it something that we need to have a discussion on what we need to allocate?
Right, any other departments that need it, or, you
Who
know,
all's
what?
requested at this point?
Well, the biggest request comes from Parks and Rec with that. We have not had other people, I think, didn't we use some of this for bonuses?
We used a little bit for the stipends, yes, we had those.
I'm
Right,
trying
but
to
that's not part of the 500.
No, that's already been spent.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
It's already
And the
spent.
ARPA fund, just say, this is for people who suffered from COVID, the
Yeah.
loss of revenue, correct?
Yes, that's
So-
the plan.
And in all due, the Parks and Rec did suffer from COVID.
Yes.
Yeah.
Quite a bit,
Yeah.
because their programs, did go down with COVID. They
Yeah.
were unable.
Nobody came in, so
No,
there was no money coming.
So, I do think that there should be some of that funding, going over there to help offset that, for that reason exactly, because that's what it's used for. And, they were affected big time by COVID.
What was the estimate for the turf? Or
I
doing
think It was
that?
like 180,000, something like
Yeah.
that. But that's going to be something that has to go through a bid or some other process
That's a whole
apparently.
other subject.
Yeah.
But that still doesn't spend all the money, that doesn't spend half of it.
So we're going to be looking to build a new police and fire station, City Hall also.
Now, is
Well-
Parks and Rec gonna be part of that? As far
Currently,
as.
they're not.
They're not going to?
Currently, they're not
And
part
why
of
is that?
Why is that?
Yeah.
Because I'm sorry, I don't mean to be going in
Yeah.
different directions, but since we're talking about money, one of the things
Always
that.
talking about money.
Yeah, well, but we still haven't seen anything, and I remember last we talked
And
about,
hopefully in the next month, we'll have renderings.
because
for
that
you
was
to
the
see.
key to have everything there, and that building out there is a money pit. So if our
Exactly.
point of getting you guys out of there, why would we leave Parks and Rec there and have
It's
them
another
use
$8
the
million
money?
to build a recreation department.
Well, I
That
think,
building is paid off at the end of this year, I believe.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
So we briefly discussed maybe adding $1 million onto that building to build what she wants.
But wouldn't you just put it all at the same compound? I don't, I'm
Well,
just curious,
but
we
there's-
won't get it, I don't mean to be getting into all
Yeah.
that now, but.
There's different philosophies, that it would be beneficial. Maybe Chestnut Hills would be a nice location, or City Park would be a good location.
I just was under the assumption everything was gonna be
I
on
thought-
that campus when we
I
talked
thought it was
about
gonna
it.
be
And
all in one.
I don't know who made that decision not to put it there.
Well,
That was never part of the plan. It was the safety forces in City Hall. We were giving it consideration. That looks like a large lot, but envision a fire station and all the vehicles that they would park around it. Then you've got the same thing with City Hall, and you've got it with the police department plus the cruisers that are sitting there. And I'm not saying I'm against her, that being there, and it would enhance her program.
Yeah, we just haven't had an update, and I remember
automatically.
talking about
But I
it.
think we need to start by seeing the renderings and how much
Yeah.
space that takes up.
Yeah, let's-
and then see how
Let's
much-
open the discussion once we have something
Yeah.
we're concrete talking about, and then we can talk about the pros and cons, and what, obviously the cons of moving Parks and Rec into that facility.
So even if the goal is to fund the grass at Chestnut Hills, then you still have $400,000 left over in unallocated ARPA funds.
Yeah.
So I think.
Right, and Bob just said, well, maybe we save that for the new, which isn't really that much considering how
No,
much it
but
costs.
There's going to be some upfront costs for the financing and bond counsel, and those lawyers are very expensive.
But how
So-
quickly would that money be spent? Because here's the thing, when we
Right.
talked about this last month, the goal was to allocate, or maybe that's not the right term, to decide how we're going to spend the remaining ARPA funds by the end of this calendar year.
Yeah, and they have to get encumbered by next year.
Right, and we're just kind of making sure we're ahead of the game here.
Excuse
That's
me,
why
they
I
have to be
wonder-
encumbered by the end of next year? By the end
of
of,
next year, right.
end of '24?
End of '24.
Yes, so we have to pinpoint, not that we've spent it, but that we've either spent it or said we're going to spend it on.
It's a little bit longer horizon than what I
Yeah, I
thought it
know,
was.
but, you know,
But
it's
to
easier to do
encumber-
it now than later.
Yeah, but to encumber something, you really need to be under like a project, so.
Right,
I mean, you can't, it has to be something specific, I
Right.
guess. So as long as we have something specific, I mean,
Well, like-
we could probably use it for some architecture fees even for the new
Well,
building as well. That might be a.
let me suggest this, since we don't have anything to move forward tonight.
Yeah.
That, obviously Parks and Recs is going to, put in their bid for spending the money. Could the administration solicit or in some way communicate with department heads about, here's approximately how much money we have? If you had the opportunity between now and December to fund a project you're interested in, would you send it along? And then maybe we could brainstorm, and if nothing else, then maybe we could just say, find what those future costs are and somehow encumber the money to do that.
I think maybe you even leave it more open-ended than that and just see from each department what their priorities are for the next 2 or 3 years, and that we have an idea, and you might be able to pinpoint yourself on what they're gonna need from there. But then we're seeing what we can allocate the ARPA funds for, but then you're giving goals, or you're seeing what their visions are for the next 2-3 years. So I think that might be interesting too. And then, Brian, can you just confirm, so if worst-case scenario, we allocate these to general fund, can you reallocate these funds then at a later date?
You could apply them similar to how we did the first round of, wasn't called ARPA, but it was the first round of the COVID funds. And we could apply them to salaries or just other expenses that we've had.
But even-
We have to do something with them next year.
Even in the case that we allocate the funds to general fund, could you, then Bob needs, the $400,000, could you reallocate those funds towards his project?
That
Or
might
once
be a
it's,
little
once it's,
tricky.
once the
Yeah, I
decision's
mean,
made, then that is it?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
why I've kind of held off too. I didn't want to do anything with them yet. 'cause-
There are people that check these
Yeah.
every month when it comes out, and if it ends up in the general fund, it's seen as fair game
Right.
to the
So
Right.
is this money, could it even be
That's true
used,
too, yes, very true.
like, in our street department, like, even for, like, possibly beautifying our, downtown, or, things maybe that we wouldn't use out of the general, money that, that we
Buy a few
wouldn't wanna
more
touch.
speed traps?
No, well, I mean, maybe something in our downtown. I know, how the city of Kent has now the Kent sign, the big Kent sign. I'm just looking at maybe different, maybe art type things that could go in our downtown. Maybe just something that we wouldn't normally spend money on because of the cost, but a percentage of it to go to our, like, street department, or even out of our
Well-
parks department, just to
Like a
help
downtown beautification.
to beautification in our downtown to make it look nice, because I'm sure COVID affected, in the long run, our downtown with our merchants, and, if it's in the end helping our downtown look prettier and more attractive, I don't know. I'm just trying to think
Well-
of something different.
Yeah, I guess my point is, I think it would be nice to hear what departments within the city, like we've already heard from Parks and Rec. They said, hey, they put 2 and 2 together and connected the dots.
We have department head meetings.
Yeah.
And we can discuss it
Yeah, that would
there.
be, okay.
And
Let's
I-
plan on doing that.
I know the wastewater department is going to have some very big projects coming up.
Okay. So let's give the administration a crack, and then if there's still money in the pot that can be spent on something else, maybe we can brainstorm, or whatever. Okay, so let's move on. The next item on the agenda is the signage issue. And in the packet, yeah, I handed that out last month. I never got it back, but here it is digitally again. Got to turn my head to see it. But you can see some designs that some clever students at Kent State University came up with. And I think this is one particular design element with different types of signs. The other thing is, we did get the Jack Schaefer memorandum with how the money he bequeathed to the city and township should be spent. And in reading this, it really doesn't provide for just generalized signage. It has signage for some of the things that Mr. Schaefer was interested in, historic markers and so forth, and then building signage for historic buildings downtown. So I don't know that the money, because we talked about that last month, that maybe we could use some of the Jack Schaefer money. I'm not so sure that the kind of signage we're talking about qualifies for that money. So if we do move forward with specific signage, probably gonna have to find out, again, maybe ARPA money, as
could be
we
part
were
of
talking about. That could be a possibility.
You could have like one big downtown beautification type project.
Absolutely.
And include that and kind of put stuff together.
But anyway, but this discussion is about the actual design, right? Is this what we're comfortable with?
Well, and I think we're kind of coming full circle too, that I don't know, we started at, does there need to be council action on this? Or is there just, we're looking for buy-in, that we want the signage and then it's up to the administration to then move forward with it? Because I'm still, I guess, the clarity aspect of this. We all want it, we've been talking about it. I don't know that there's.
So it was my understanding when Streetscape was, at the inception of Streetscape, city council stated they didn't want signs. They wanted to remove the sign pollution that was downtown. And that's been upheld through, since
Is that 93?
1993.
Yeah.
I think it was. So
Okay.
administration has thought city council should be the one saying, yeah, go ahead.
I see.
Now, we have
Okay.
different traffic signal poles. I'm not a fan of hanging signs on the mast arms of the traffic signals.
Right, right.
Possibly, they could hold up to a sign. I mean, it's a big wind sail type of thing. But again, you have to be selective of what's done. So
Yeah.
historically, I've said, no, there will be no signs until we have a policy or city council agrees this is what you want. And as
Okay.
you know, we've discussed multiple times over the years, there's 5 different organizations that want signage. And these, the block between Parkway and Meridian is 250 feet long. You can't have too many signs in that small
Well,
stretch.
But these signs are city signs, not,
I understand that, correct.
business signs.
And they do look nice. I think at the right locations,
Yeah.
they would be,
And done right.
and yes, they'd be an attribute to the city. But as a motorist and a bicyclist and a pedestrian, with the trees and all the other things going on Main Street, angled parking, we have to be real selective of the location.
Yeah, and I think it was twofold that, Rob, I'm happy to work on a policy if we want to go down that rabbit hole. I think the other thing was what you were talking about in the past, and bringing out, everybody's asking for signs. So if there's one design that we agree on, then that is the umbrella that they have to work under. So if you're looking at the directional signs, then that if they make the cut, that's what it's going to look like.
And you made a good point about the trees, because if something like this was chosen, then it would have to be, the trees would have to be sculpted in a way that the signs would be unobstructed.
Yeah, and it's not a sign on every street corner. I think it's just.
No, just every so many.
Yeah. But I think
But I
moving.
mean, like, I was just at a small town in Pennsylvania, and they had really, and I just happened from driving around, enter from 2 different locations, and they had really nice welcome to Nazareth, Pennsylvania signs. And,
That's a nice place.
yeah.
We've gone in circles on this, so
what do
I
we
think
need to do?
a goal by November to have this either passed or approved or whatever we need to do to get it off our docket, I think we need to do.
What is that we need to do then?
I am happy to put together a policy if that's
Okay.
if that's what Bob and the administration want. I think agreeing to the design, and then Cliff, I already hear you on the ARPA funds, how the money would be spent if we're moving forward with the signage.
Okay. All right, you and I can brainstorm.
I think we should
policy.
probably get out the paperwork that came with that donation and look at it. Just sitting here, I was thinking that there was an ingredient in there for working with the township. One of his goals was to get the two to work together. And they talked about putting some of the signage out in the township. It still might say, welcome to Ravenna, but it might be sitting at the entrance. I'll see if I can dig my copy out of that and see what, so you
Well,
got it.
I have it in front of me. Oh, did you? Yeah.
Okay.
The signage section says, Jack's Stories memorialized in historic or history markers. Post office, cemetery, original grid, $11,000. 3 signs does not include installation. So there would be $11,000 for 3 signs memorializing the stories Jack, I guess, on his walks or whatever. And then the second one is building signage for historic buildings downtown, date built, early businesses, et cetera, which would only, according to this grid, only benefit the city, and it would be $4,500. Work with the Design Review Commission and Main Street Ravenna. But it doesn't really account for the kind of signs we're talking about. So I think there could be some concern about, you know, this donation being used for things that were not in their list. Does that make sense, Mayor?
Yes,
Okay.
it does.
So, yeah, so we will have to come up with funds to do this.
Actually, I'll know where to get it.
All right, so we'll work on that, but are you saying we should move this forward?
I would like to, yes.
Okay, we'll give it a shot. Is that okay with the committee to move it forward? We don't have anything on paper, but we'll work on it.
I'm good.
All right, so let's see, so that leaves us with if Mr. Sodol could come up. He approached me before the meeting asking to speak to, I believe, what happened at a recent Design Review Commission with regards to the prospectus contract.
Yeah, last Thursday, we had a meeting, and Bob brought it to our attention that Prospectus wanted to start the meeting process. Is that right, Bob?
Yes.
But they wanted a preliminary meeting first with some of us available for that meeting to see what we might cover in the next meeting. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. First of all, I want to announce and clarify that I'm not representing the DRC in any way speaking here, because they never asked me to do this. This is all on me, and they didn't ask me to bring it up. But my fear here is not what Bob does. Bob is our intermediary, our in-between person between Prospectus and the city in the spending of our $30,000 that we've put out on this, or taxpayers have put out on this. And I just want to make sure that, because you all here will be the final people that vote on this, that you're made aware constantly of what might be happening in there. Not that Bob hasn't done that already, but I want to make sure that you understand that I will, if not, if it isn't brought up, that what's going on there. And my real fear at this point will be, and it might be unfounded, is that they're not going to adhere to the RFQ requirements, okay? And those RFQ requirements were interviewing people, and the first thing they've talked about now, the first 2 meetings, they want to do Zoom meetings. That wasn't part of the RFQ, so I want to make sure from this point on that we do in-person meetings. That's what the RFQ said, right, Bob?
Yes, and that's something that, so at our design review meeting, I wanted a small committee, so design review doesn't, you have too many people that bogs it down. Design review will ultimately hear the whole proposal, that same with city council. But, so the first one they wanted to just briefly discuss, so Ted Manfres, Cliff, and I, and I think we picked Lou Dudek since he wasn't at the meeting.
Real quick on that, I'm not sure that you can do that, but we might want to talk about that.
Okay, all right, well,
Okay, yeah.
so there'll be a third person. I'm obviously a non-voting member, I'm just gonna help keep herding them. So that was a kickoff, and then at the next design review meeting in November, they were going to Zoom in, and there's I think a group of 4 of them. And if you put 4 of them in a car and drove from Cleveland down here, you know what that price tag is? The 30,000 will get eaten just by them driving quickly. Eaten quickly by them driving down here. So I understand what you're saying, but when we meet with them through phone or Zoom in a week or 2, that's something that we need to discuss with them, to set a schedule, to see when it would be advantageous for them to meet with the chamber, Main Street, have a public meeting, that sort of thing.
Right, and that's the only reason that I'm here. And back to that, another person, I'm not sure we can have 3 unless it's gonna be a public meeting.
Well,
I have
think
to
it-
check on that, because
yeah,
when
legally
it gets
it's
part of the point.
A subcommittee, can you have a subcommittee meeting that doesn't necessarily require a vote?
Well, we'll have to check on that, I think, about how many people can be involved with a meeting before it's a meeting in the sunshine laws. You understand? I mean, I don't want you to get in trouble on it, or us to get in trouble on this.
Sure.
I don't care if they were all there. But obviously want to keep it down so it
Keep it
isn't
moving.
too many people.
Right.
So again, I worry that we're paying $30,000 and we're not going to adhere to some of the RFQ. Not what you do, but what Prospectus is going to want to do, because they're going to want to do it the cheapest and the fastest way that they can do it, because they're on a budget, and it's our dime, but they're spending it, so, okay. That's the only thing that I wanted to say. And I will keep you posted, as will Bob, but my keeping you posted is only from my perspective, okay, because I'm not representing them, because I don't want to get in trouble, because I've been told before that I threw people under the bus when I was telling the truth, okay? So I'm only here to tell you what is going on in the meetings that I see, and my fears, which is, I think, okay. I just don't want to be looked at as I threw anybody under the bus, so I don't represent them in any of this.
Yeah, so, I mean, their response did include a timeline. Now, of course, it's about a year old, but it didn't really say whether the meetings would be in person, so.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Does it?
Yeah, last sentence is yes.
Well, I didn't know this was coming up tonight, so I haven't reviewed this, but I'll look this over. The interesting thing, though, I was just thinking, because you were talking about, and I don't know how the sunshine laws intersect here, but you remember we did lower the quorum that established what a meeting could be for the Design Review Commission. So that, just keep that in mind. Because you're right, if it's only 2, and you have 2 people meeting with Prospectus, that could be an open meeting subject to public review.
I'm not sure that those intersect, how many people that it's an actual meeting, or how many people that you can have to keep it a sunshine law actual.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Now, talking about voting, you're talking about over here maybe voting, how many people you need to vote, and have an actual meeting so you could have a vote.
Right.
To a meeting that you can have when it's not a public meeting.
Well,
We didn't really address that, did we, Bob? That if that first meeting would be public, or it would be just with enough people there to talk about?
The intent was for not to have all of design review show up. It's hard enough getting them to show up once a month. So the intent was just to keep it short, to represent the design review, and then obviously at the design review meeting in November, everybody would be present.
I think Chelsea's a good person that I've already talked with her, I'm gonna tip you, that I just asked the question, at what point? Because she's gone to the classes, and she's our person that knows the rules, and probably we can look them up for her. If she doesn't know everything, that she can rule on that for us, so.
Bob, do you know when the meeting is?
The design review meeting?
No, the meeting
Oh,
with,
we haven't set it yet.
I mean, if you knew 24 hours in advance, you could put it on the public schedule. It's publicized. Hit record on Zoom, and if you have 2 people, then I would just lean on that, and then Chelsea can correct me if I got any of that wrong, but that's what I would do.
I'm probably going to shoot for the 25th or the 26th next week, or in 2 weeks.
And are we talking about the kickoff meeting? Is that Or are we just talking about some other informal meeting?
Preliminary,
Preliminary to set the
Okay.
stage for next month.
I mean, I would refer to their RFQ and see that they've identified specific meetings. And again, the dates are almost a year old, but I would think that the schedule, in terms of sequence, should still hold up. Okay,
I think that's what you're going to
Yeah.
try to.
Yes.
To accomplish at the
Right.
next meeting.
okay.
Right.
Thanks, Cliff.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Okay, I think that's everything on our agenda. Mayor, do you have a management update?
No,
I'll just add that
Yes.
I have sent out SOQs for Osborne Park
Oh,
to 6 architectural firms, and they're due back to me November 3rd, I believe.
Nice.
I'll have the park board involved
And you haven't received any yet?
No, not yet.
Okay.
But I've received a few emails that they received the SOQ and they're willing and interested in submitting. That is moving forward.
Okay, so with nothing else to discuss, I will adjourn the planning committee at 7:32 PM.